Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our show, the Colin Mary and Friends show. This evening, our topic is basically going to be based on the newly reshuffled cabinet by the Prime Minister, the Most Honorable Andrew Holness. Today we have Mr. Julian Silvera, who is going to give his views and opinions on that cabinet reshuffle. And also in this show, we will be discussing our education system. And we have Mrs. Elaine Foster Allen and Mr. Owen Speed, to share their views and opinion on the state of our education system. And to be frank, to give some frank discussion on that, where we're at presently and where they would love to see the education system move. The first segment of the show, however, we will be focusing on the newly reshuffled cabinet that was recently done by the Prime Minister. And to join in that discussion is Mr. Julian Silvera, former Member of Parliament for Western St. Mary. He served as Member of Parliament in 2011 to 2016. He was a first-time Member of Parliament under the Portia Simpson administration. He represented one of the largest constituencies in Jamaica, of course, Western St. Mary, and has always been a team player. He's also from a family of parliamentarians. His uncle, Mr. Noel Silvera, served as Minister of Home Affairs and Justice Minister under the Michael Manley-led administration. Mr. Silvera, welcome. Thanks for joining us, and we look forward to hearing your views and opinion on this newly reshuffled cabinet.
Thank you for having me, and good evening to everyone.
Good evening.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Yes, sir. Pleasant evening to you.
Thank you.
You may begin, Mr. Silvera, whenever you're ready.
Okay. First of all, when we analyze what has taken place over from 2016 onward, and the cabinet has only been shuffled, I think, twice. But the last one in particular, what I have seen will not make the grade that is necessary to shift Jamaica where we are now to where we'd like to see Jamaica, lies in the present. And in any government, there are some key ministers or ministries. The education ministry is one you have to look at carefully, because the way how the system is today, I personally believe that the system will be revamped, and we have to find ways and means to get ourselves and our nation ready for what the future lies, and that's most like a logistics era. Secondly, you'd have to look on national security, and that is where we must feel safe in our own homes and in our own country. Thirdly, we have to look at the Minister of Finance, which is there to make sure that the books are balanced, but nevertheless that people's lives are also balanced. And fourthly, we have to look on the economic development of this country in terms of getting the FDIs, the foreign direct investment, to coming here to spur the growth that we need, and also to make us have the country grow, but most of all to make Jamaicans, gainfully employed, and can have, way of life that is suited by each and everyone, just deserved. Firstly, I think, the Minister of National Security. Based on all indications and all statistics that you can throw out there, I would say that this may be our worst minister to date. And I will go on record to say also that, even the Prime Minister, which is now the Member of Parliament in Western St. Mary, even his record is better than what we have today. We're not hearing of any initiatives coming from that ministry to see how we can spur or control this escalating crime. We're not hearing any initiatives that are coming from the ministry that, you know, we can deal with the unattached youth, or we can gainfully reintegrate them back into society. We're not hearing of anything coming from that ministry that we must find ways to mitigate, you know, what we call this new domestic confrontation that is growing. I don't know if it's because of the pandemic we just have or we're still experiencing, where all of us were seen to be literally caged. Understand? And from there, we have no psychiatric evaluations. I don't know if anything has been done in the education system, because if you notice that we have been having a lot of internal wars or battles among students in schools, and I leave that to those esteemed guests you have on the program. So I would personally say that Horace Chan should have been replaced, right? When I look at the health sector, it is one big bamboo fire, one big puff, one hype, and nothing has been done beside overspending of the public coffers. And we go to Cornwall Regional Hospital, which has overrun maybe 4 or 5 times what it was scheduled to be spent on it. And why I'm saying this is that when you look on, I don't want to go into that depth because I don't want to seem that political. I'm just speaking off surface as a layman. When you hear the grand announcement of the Spanish Town Hospital, the wing that is going to be built, or how they're going to remodel it, I've seen the plans at the mayor's. Lovely thing. What has happened in Cornwall Regional Hospital in terms of monies that have been spent could have built 5 hospitals, the new hospital that was scheduled to build in Spanish Town. 5 of them, it could have been built. When you look on the system that is operating today in the hospitals, the nurses, the doctors, all of them will tell you, right? It's only by the grace of God that at times some patients are saved. Because the machines are outdated. There's no repair system taking place in terms of not only repairing, just servicing of these machines. For instance, you know, you go to KPH, you want to do an MRI, what the machines are down, you have to go to a private institution. And when you look at the backlog of those persons who are supposed to just get a simple MRI or a CAT scan, they have to wait for months. The cancer patients, the same thing for screening. So you go there in the hospitals, a simple cancer patient that's stage 1, time that person is done going through the system, them have stage 3. When you look at the shortages of just the decency of lying down in the hospital, the beds, when you see the pictures of people on the floors lying down, when you see the lines outside, you realize that something isn't right in there. And if it were supposed to use a Fenton Ferguson scenario where Fenton had the chicken gun there, the prime minister of that then had to remove Fenton. But somehow these people seem to, you know, they're made out of Teflon, so they can't be removed. I consider the education industry a failure to Jamaica. The finance minister, he has gotten some things right, but again, I don't want to get embroiled in what is happening. I just believe that equity needs to prevail and good common sense of what is taking place. Because the truth and in fact is that there has been over 40% increase in the cost of living per household or to each individual. In from 2016, the threshold was 1.5. The threshold needs to go up to 4 or 5 million now, so we can live the same way we used to live in 2016. That needs to happen. I don't know why. You know, the broader Jamaica isn't being taken into into view, and I don't want to get involved in terms of the salaries and all of that tonight. But in terms of having the books, you know, I couldn't say, you know, he has done a fantastic job, but I don't think he has failed this country, because the truth and be told is that the legislative process was done by the Portia Simpson Miller administration prior. So basically, you're just carrying out what has been passed in Parliament or what has come into laws. So more monies are coming into the coffers. But when you look on the amount of money that is coming into the coffers and you're looking on people's lives, you realize that the more money we're spending in Jamaica, it seems that people are just getting poorer. But I could not kill Dr. Nigel Clark presently. Right, so I would say, he's staying there on a panel, maybe the brightest out of the bunch there to deal with finance. We're having a problem with the foreign direct investment. You know, when we heard of all that, it's 4 and 5. Within 5 years, the country is going to grow 4%, and it was all this hype, you know, and they can't say anything around that because they have failed the country from there in terms of the economic growth, the investments that would come. You know, they appointed a special ambassador to go to India and all over these places in the Middle East to gain investments for the country. I have not seen nothing, you know, coming forward. What still remains as the biggest foreign direct investment are, you know, check China Harbor in terms of the monies they're using to invest in the infrastructure. As I think that's the biggest one. And you know, you're going to have some hotels that are coming on as a foreign direct investment. And all of these things are intertwined, you know, in order to have what we'd like to have, like the national growth for the country. Because if you have a country that the stability in terms of the exchange rate fluctuates, you won't gain persons coming in. If you have the uncertainty of the safety of persons who are investing in terms of maybe the security of the persons who are investing their monies into projects, you know, they might find a way also to feel uncomfortable of coming in. When you're looking on the type of jobs that needs to be done or what needs to be had, you have to look on the education system. Are we providing, you know, the necessary training for all these persons also? You understand? And when you're looking, you know, holistically, you know, these 3, 4, 5 ministries are key for national growth. When
if I may, Mr.
go ahead.
Sapira, just a point that you mentioned, that you don't think that the Minister of Finance is a failure. And even with the recent salary increase, you would have followed a principle that was left there by Minister, the most honorable Prime Minister Portia Simpson Miller. And when I read a report, however, this principle that they followed was coming from Michael Manley days. It's a principle. A principle is set, however, it has to incorporate the relevance of the present time. So you have a principle. The principle didn't dictate the dollar value. The principle didn't dictate the amount at where the ministers should start their salary. So whilst we agree that the Minister of Finance may have followed a principle of how these salaries increases were done, And outside of a principle, just a principle, because we see where they also spent millions to engage the consultants of Ernest and Young. So to say that you wouldn't give him a failing grade because he had followed pre-existing principles set, and this is just my view, I kind of disagree, and that he's not a failure. And the fact that inflation keeps wiping out whatever increase the average person would have gotten based on where their increase at start, that is also a failure. The fact that import costs, foreign exchange variance is still, the foreign exchange variance works good for FDI, it doesn't work for us because we are bearing the brunt. Our dollar value less, so it costs us more. So they are not really at the disadvantage. It's us as a country whose dollar don't have no value. And just the basic chaos and confusion and the distrustful behavior of the Minister of Finance and how he interacts with the public bodies, and just how he handles the ministry on a whole, from my perspective, and these are not yours, but I'm sharing my views on his performance, I don't see him as a success story. And I just want to be.
No, I respect everybody's view. You understand? I never said he was a success story. I'm not saying that the previous ministers I mentioned, I consider them abstract failures. I don't consider Dr. Clark to be an abstract failure. Yes, he has tendencies of some form of arrogance creeping in at times. You understand? We have seen that. And yes, he has had tendencies of not, sitting down and speaking to the public bodies and trying to institute things in a specific timeline. Yes, those are things that, could have been handled differently. Right, but just
and managing the overruns. You mentioned the overruns also. He has not been managing the public purse properly. Because if he was managing the if he were managing the public purse responsibly and really taking charge of his fiduciary duties the finance, we would not have because you have this money, you are in control of this money, and you need to ensure that you spend it to the best interest of the people. So if you can't spend it to the best of the people for them to get value for money, for their tax dollars, and for the amount of loan, the burden that we have to bear for the amount of loan that we're servicing, then, something is amiss in his performance. That's my opinion.
Yeah, all right, fine. But my thing is that if, for instance, that each ministry has a subvention, all right? So he awards each ministry how much billions to security, billions to health, billions to education, fine. But also the education system, or any ministry also has the responsibility of managing that money, right? So if he gives that, it's the minister's responsibility along with his chief accountant, that is the permanent secretary, to manage that money. It's not necessarily, so yes, he can call them in and ask them what is happening, show me why this is happening, but yet you're showing him, yeah, listen to me, we have to dig 500 feet more because what has caused it over. So they get the proper explanations. What needs to be strengthened is the accountability from the ministry's side. So can a permanent secretary be held for overspending and be called out? These are the things that we need to have, right? So it's not just the minister because he gives to the ministries. The ministries also need to be held accountable, right? The bodies that does the auditing and until the laws are strengthened in the parliament, the integrity act, you see them they're debating now, and this is some pushing it aside and all of that. Until that is strengthened and given teeth, then when that has teeth and persons are being charged or whether imprisoned for the misuse of the public coffers, then we'll start to see the strengthening. Then we'll start to see, more value for money being spent. You know, he can't just overall say that everything is spent down to the purchasing of a needle or some asphalt. In those ministers collectively should be able to be held accountable for that type of overruns, because they have the permanent secretary and they are staffed with the necessary people, the project managers, the this, the that. They need to make sure that this doesn't happen, but it happens.
Okay.
So
What
until
do you
those
think
persons
of?
can,
Matt,
go ahead.
I wanted to bring it back to Dr. Horace Chang, you know.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you were saying that he was, I mean, basically the worst security minister. Okay, so instead of Andrew Holness bringing in someone from the outside, as we have several commissioners of police and senior police, you know, who have retired and has come through the Senate. I mean, they could come through the Senate and be appointed as a minister of state, you know, in the national security. So instead of having a novice, you know, I mean, or a rookie, you know, in this complex and demanding ministry, you know, does Andrew Holness really serious or care about security of the Jamaican people? Because I don't see Holness, I'm not Holness.
The truth be told is that
No,
when
Juliet
you're having
Cuthbert,
that,
when he assigned Juliet Cuthbert as state minister to security. Okay.
To the security, yeah. Because we were trying to revamp cabinet.
No, I understand where you're going, but the truth is that when you have dialogue with the rank and file, right? A soldier doesn't understand policing, right? And they will tell you point blank. They're not going to tell it to the commissioner's face. The commissioner is a failure, right? I didn't want to go down that line at all. But I'm just saying that within the rank and file of the police, they must be able to choose or recommend who they would want to be commissioner, because they understand the system. When you come and you impose a different way of tackling crime, right? And you're coming from the army's perspective. But remember, the law also said that even if there are incidents where the armies have to be called in, you need a police to be with them. So if they're going on where we normally call patrols, a police is there with them because they know the law of the land. They fight crime differently, right? And we understand that things and times have changed, and you're trying to use, going intelligence to fight crime. But the truth, that can be a different topic totally. But until Chang, why has not Chang been removed? I don't know.
But do you? I think Juliet Cuthbert is a good compliment. I think that's where Mr. Mary was trying to go. Of all the persons, do you think Juliet Cuthbert adds any value to that ministry?
Yeah, I don't see her.
Well, if you want to bring like a human in there, maybe she will teach you how to run fast. But
do you think Marsha Smith adds any value to education?
To finance? No.
To education, Marsha Smith.
I don't. One of the things that I'm looking at when I see this cabinet and I see the ministers of state, I realize that they're trying to balance this thing with this agenda. They're trying to get a balance amongst themselves. Because I am wondering, and I know that she is a very intelligent woman, is the Prime Minister's wife. I think she's an engineer. You understand? She is an intelligent person. I don't see why, she wouldn't have gotten a nod, You know, she's a second term person. I honestly believe when I hear her in the committee meetings, right? I know she's much more in tune and smarter than what is, you know, has been delivered into the ministry, the ministers of state. Right? So I'm just wondering why her exclusion. And when you look at the switch between Floyd, when I speak to people in the ministries, I said Floyd has a better command of agriculture than Colonel Charles Jr. Right? He came up there and he was changing around everything. He wasn't allowing it to flow like it normally would flow. Right? So I think that bringing Floyd back to agriculture, you know, is one of his better moves. Right? I don't know
What about
how.
JC in technology?
I'm just looking at some of these people are just rewarded because they're just servants of
for the boys.
Reward for loyalty, right?
Yeah. So that is how I look at it. You know, JC Hutchinson was at what, transport and mining.
Yeah.
And you remember, you know, in the previous JLP administration, you know, I think when Tufton was Minister of Agriculture, JC Hutchinson was his junior, and we never saw much of him neither. Right? So I'm looking at what has happened is basically a reward for persons who have been loyal to the Prime Minister. That's how I look at it.
And as you talk
But
about loyal, Mr. Silvera, there's a situation
talk about who?
The loyal, they are to the Prime Minister.
Yeah.
There's a situation that, I mean, I did a live about it, you know, where in regards to Dr. Chang, and he being Deputy Prime Minister and being paid a salary for a position which does not exist, you know, and I want to call on the Auditor General and the Integrity Commission, you know, to look into this, as it could be fraudulent. You know, the Prime Minister has paid Horace Chang, his deputy, who is the General Secretary of his party, the Jamaican, a salary more than any other ministers for being Deputy Prime Minister, wherein that is not a constitutionally appointed job, you know? So he's getting basically $2 million more than the other MPs, you know, for that.
For the ministers?
Yeah. So isn't
what is the structure? Isn't it the Prime Minister, then the National Security, and then the Finance Minister?
Correct.
In terms of pay structure?
No, the Finance Minister.
Finance, then the National Security Minister.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, but he's getting more than the Finance Minister. You know, so isn't that a breach of Andrew fiduciary duty to the people of Jamaica? Because as Prime Minister, he has the ultimate custodian of the public purse, and as such, he has responsibility to ensure that our tax dollars is being spent on the country, and people cunningly creating these positions as a means of diverting tax dollars to his friend and family.
My issue now is that even I just want to say something categorically. I'm for every person who is in government or the public sector to be paid a salary that is equal or better, you know, but for the cost of living that exists in today's space. Right? I personally believe that I think salaries should be reviewed every 2 years or a year based on maybe the inflation that is taking place. Understand? So it's not something that is just pegged and then is reviewed every 5 years. And I just believe that it should review annually, and we put those checks and balances in place. And so we don't get what we don't get is this massive increase just one time. So if you have something that is graded based on, you know, the stability of the dollar, is pegged to the dollar, right? Then we'll be in this fluster that we are in today. Okay? So I just believe that the cost of living should be dealt with person's salary. If it goes up 3% inflation, salaries go up 3% automatically.
I think
That's just my
I think the principle that Mr. Murray was trying to bring out, however, is that in a country that is not financially the best, we're probably not doing the worst within the region, but we're definitely far away from doing what we are supposed to be doing, or where we would like the country to move financially healthy, to create a debt, and by creating an unconstitutional position, a deputy prime minister position that requires you to pay a particular person more just for that position that he acts in, or the few times that he wants you to act, because I've seen the prime minister leave the country and he didn't declare anything about the deputy prime minister being charged.
But
Just goes in and comes back.
isn't he just deputy prime minister, irrespective of
No,
Mr.
but his
Holness leaving the
pay,
country?
his pay reflects the principle that I think Mr. Murray was trying to get at, is
No,
that
I
we are not
understand, you know,
financially the most healthy. So
Uh-huh.
how do you have these monies to basically prioritize around loyalty, compensating for loyalty, and your camaraderie within, your rewarding your friends within and your foot soldiers within your party, when there's so much that is lacking in the country? You mentioned some of them, and there's so much more.
No, I agree
think
with you,
what Mr.
Andrea.
Murray is getting at is that the government has been shortchanging the people, and the people, these things need to be addressed.
Yes, and I understand what Mr. Murray is saying.
Ambassador plenipotentiary, you know?
Yeah. No, I understand all of that, you know, what you're saying, you know, and I disagree with a lot that has been happening, right? But one of the things that what strikes me the most is that we as Jamaicans, we tend to have issue when the People's National Party is in power. And whether you want to demonstrate this, that, because I think when the People's National Party is in power, we actually listen to the people on the ground, right? When the GLP is in power, they tell you exactly what they're going to do. So if anybody feels that the salary is going to roll back, it will never roll back. And that's just my view. You understand? Because what I've gotten so far is that the retroactive has been paid from last week, Friday. So it already has hit the accounts. And I just believe that I just honestly believe that they're at a stage. It seems that there's some internal issues within the JLP. I think there's some power struggles. Something might implode. Because if the Honorable Holness was going to shuffle his cabinet and only came out with 3 different changes because 2 ministers had said that they're leaving, Carl Samud and Audley Shaw, and he just basically switch around a couple of persons. That's not a meaningful impact. And he gave maybe one of the longest and the lamest speeches I've ever heard, in coming from somebody, or buck shuffling. You don't even know where to go down. You don't even know how to connect to the people, because you knew within yourself that you were doing the Jamaica people injustice when you came up with that, with the 01 45-minute speech. But we're not here to look at that. I'm just saying that overall, the cabinet itself has failed the country. But as individual ministers, understand, I was just highlighting that the critical ones that we need to move forward, maybe 4 out of 5 have failed us terribly. Adding a Juliet and adding J.C. Hutchinson, adding Marsha Smith. That is nothing. I think Marsha Smith is there just plain loyalty because of Ernest Smith, who was a loyalist to Andrew Holness. Marsha Smith in trouble in Northeast St. Anne. I was down there the other day. They were demonstrating, they're burning her shirts, and these were the hard rock stone persons who supported her. Right?
All right,
And I
Mr.
think what he
Silvera,
has done, I just want to wrap up. What I think he has done to, and he has realized, is that a lot of these seats are in trouble. So he's trying to basically give these people some form of relevance so they can go back to their people to try to see if they can galvanize it, you know, like they did in the last 2 elections. But as I said, from my
and he's
side,
doing all of this at the
time
expense of the people. And he
May I
has
ask-
been doing all of this at the expense of the taxpayers. Mr. Silvera, thank you so much for being here.
No
We
problem.
value your opinion and we look forward to having you again. Thank you so very much for being here.
You guys continue to, thanks for having me. You guys have a wonderful discussion.
Thank you so very much.
Great.
All right. Our next segment, we will be discussing our education system, and we have with us to basically have some discussion on that matter, Mrs. Elaine Foster Allen and Mr. Owen Speed. They're two very learned persons and who will be able to articulate their views and opinions on this this aspect of our discussion fairly well. Mrs. Elaine Foster Allen is a teacher by profession and a public service administrator. She was permanent secretary in the Office of the Prime Minister, permanent secretary in the Ministry of Health, and permanent secretary in the Ministry of Education. She's retired and is now on education. And also presently she has sight on entering representational politics, where she has the desire to represent PNP in West St. Andrew constituency. Mrs. Elaine Foster Allen, welcome. I'm going to go right ahead and introduce Mr. Owen also. Mr. Speed is a former JTA president. He was president for the year 2019 to 2020. He's an outstanding educator. Whilst being president of the JTA, Mr. Speed led the fight for the teachers of Jamaica as it relates to better conditions for them. He was also focused on their security concerns that they usually face in the classrooms, and he was seen as a strong leader in how he executed his roles and responsibilities as the JTA president. Welcome, Mr. Speaker. The floor is all yours, and also Pastor Allen.
Thank you. Ladies before gentlemen, I'll allow that.
Hi, Owen. Thank you very much, Andrea. Thank you, Mr. Mary, for inviting me to join in this discussion. Lots to say about education. I think in my many years of being in education, both here in Jamaica and having lived in the UK, it's the worst I've seen education in every aspect that I can think about education. Whether you're talking about teachers, the infrastructural issues that surround schools, the leadership of the Ministry of Education, you name it, I think it's the worst I've seen it. Would you like me to go on, or would you like Owen to give his opening salvo?
Mr. Speed, you can give us your general overview of where you want to take the discussion.
Okay,
And then
so
we can go ahead.
totally with Mrs. Foster, I have seen that. I've seen the degradation too in the sector. I have seen that it is somewhat, if you could say that, it seems rudderless. In other words, the leadership is not channeling any the country and the people who are supposed to be led in education. They are not being channeled in any particular direction. It's just like they get up every day and whatever goes just happen. And they allow that to happen over a period of time. That's what I am seeing there. And as you mentioned about putting Marsha Smith there, I have to wonder, because I've anticipated that you'd want to put people who have some background experience in the field, in certain positions. And I would humbly suggest, and I have been suggesting it on social media, I don't know how many persons are watching, but I would humbly suggest that they put even Rhoda Crawford in there ahead of Marsha. Rhoda is in education. Rhoda, as far as I know, she attended Shortwood Teachers College. First time, you don't have to say anything about that. But yes, and I would think that Rhoda probably would have been a better pick than Marsha. In fact, I would even suggest Rhoda to take the reins from the minister herself. Because what is happening in education, you need somebody to inspire some amount of hope and channel a way forward. But that is not happening. In fact, our minister is more interested in taking on the JTA president in the public space, when the truth is that the JTA has always had open doors to the Ministry of Education. I have seen when I was president in 2019 to 2020, that we had meetings arranged between JTA and the Ministry of Education in less than 24 hours. So if there's an issue, we wouldn't have anticipated that the minister would have come out in the public space, even threatening to publish people's pay slip. And that's the lowest that anyone could get. And I talk straight all the times, and whether they like it or whatever. But I'm just saying the minister seems to be pressing the panic button. For actions like those, I would think that she's panicking because she sees that a lot is going wrong. And I was sharing a light joke with somebody that the number of things that are going wrong in education, we might as well start telling people to drive on the right. So see if everything can go right in Jamaica.
Okay.
I think, may I just pick up from there, Andrea?
Sure.
I was thinking that a huge part of the problem is that the minister does not have competent thought leaders in permanent positions at the Ministry of Education. You have an acting permanent secretary, you have an acting chief education officer, and other tiers of people who are also acting. The minister is supposed to deal with policy. The permanent secretary and his or her staff should be giving the minister options from which he or she can choose. I don't think that the persons at the ministry appear to have that sort of capacity to do the work. And so when you think about what happened during the COVID-19 pandemic, they started to do a lot of micromanaging of principals and teachers, to the extent that the principals could get nothing done because they were always being asked for one set of data and another set and different instructions being sent out, and people just did not have the appreciation of what principals could do in their own right. And in fact, some of the principals, some of the feisty principals decided that they would do what they know is urgent and necessary for the children that they're teaching. And it continues to be so. In the meantime, the minister keeps, I don't know which one of the senior leadership team members continues to tell the minister that, talk about this today, talk about that tomorrow, bring in TVET in primary schools today, and bring in something else. And it just appears to be a series of it's just travesty after
Chaos and
travesty.
confusion.
Confusion, sheer confusion, Andrea. And let me just say that I don't believe that Marsha Smith has much to offer the minister, not in terms of education. I don't know if she may be able to offer something in terms of the youth portfolio, but it doesn't appear that she has the capacity or the wherewithal to do what is necessary. So when the question arose about the cabinet reshuffle, I think the answer should be it was jobs for the boys and the girls, because it did not appear that the people had the capacity. Now you tell me there are 49 members of the Jamaica Labour Party in government, right, at one level or another, and yet the Prime Minister could not find enough people from within that cohort to put together a reasonable and a reasonably performing cabinet, because all it has been is it's like just moving things around a little bit and not squeezing anybody, not upsetting the apple cart, so to speak, and it's business as usual. And Andrea and friends, I actually think that I suspect certain things. I am a woman of suspicion, and it's good, it's healthy, because if you had the children of Jamaica at heart, and if you really wanted to do something for the children, you would put people in that ministry who have the heart, who have the compassion, who have the intellectual capacity to do what is needed. You would not have, well, I'm not even sure what the numbers are now, because during the pandemic, we were told that it was 20,000, then we were told that it may be 30 or 40, or whatever the figures may be. I believe that it's a deliberate ploy to under-educate Jamaica's children, so that down the line, maybe 15 years down the line, or 10 years down the line, you will get a cohort of children who are uneducated, undereducated, ineducable, and they will wreak havoc. So when this government talks
systematic, it's a systematic ploy to keep the nation uneducated, so it gives them power and control.
It gives them power to control, and they will always be begging and
dependent on
dependent.
right.
But it goes, when you think about it, when you think about a continuum of obscenity, which I believe this government has fostered, it's obscene for ministers of government, prime minister, whoever, to get a pay increase of 200% plus. It is just obscene. Don't even talk about equality. It is an obscenity. Right? And then when you think about the teachers who got the 20%, come on, and the expectation, what do you expect of teachers when you give them a 20% pay increase and you take 300%? And it's, I don't buy this thing that the Prime Minister is saying, oh, I won't take mine. Well, he won't take his, but others are taking. He says he won't. I mean, he would have to go to the Parliament and go through the process to actually.
He has not done that yet.
And he hasn't done that.
Right. Thank you so much, Mrs. Foster Allen. Mr. Speed, floor is yours, sir.
Hold on, Mr. Speed. Your friend that you invited, you care to just introduce him to us, please? Mr.
Okay, right, great. Mr. Wittick, is it Mr. Wittick? Right.
Yeah, he's from the Saudi Crest show. He does that as well. So
Welcome,
he can
Mr. Wittick.
him, but he's a school principal here in Jamaica.
Okay.
Who I guess is on leave.
Well,
I'm certain, but he can tell you more.
Well,
I
I'm
have
back
a
at work.
concern. I don't know if Mr. Wittick will be able to answer that. It's a concern that since the pandemic, we have report of fallout or decline in our nation's children rejoining the education system. And we really want the nation to know how effective has the Ministry of Education been in relocating or locating those kids and reintegrating them into the education system. I don't know who can give an update on that process to see if we have had full reintegration of our nation kids back into the system.
All right, let me say good evening, everyone, and thank you very much for having me. Well, that has been a really rocky road we're traveling on since the pandemic, and we all understand that what had happened, especially here in Jamaica, more so in the rural part of the country. I am an administrator in the rural Jamaica, yes, and the ministry, yes, have embarked on a program, the Yard to Yard initiative, that they try to move around communities from house to house, locate the number of students, a vast amount of students who were absent, who were not engaged after, or should I say during the pandemic and after the pandemic. I think that I've borne a little success, in my opinion, but I can speak definitely to the schools in and around my area, especially during the QEC to which I operate. For my school, that is, after the pandemic, we had an issue. And personally, I move ahead before the Yard to Yard initiative. And so that assisted us in getting back our students on track and getting them to school. There are a lot of students who were displaced based on parental issues, where families have migrate from one community to the next based on seeking jobs. Some persons have probably lost their home because they were unable to pay rent or to continue in that environment. However, right now, in my area, I can speak to it. It's not so bad. I think there are some schools, maybe the high schools have had it much more difficult than the primary schools, because many of these high school students, the teenagers, they have found themselves work. And especially the boys, getting a little change, I would say, here and there.
Taste of money, they just want to continue the hustling.
Yes, than going back to school.
That's child.
That's an issue there, but as it relates to the primary schools, I think we are basically somewhat where we were before the pandemic in terms of population.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay.
Mr. Speed, based on you being a former...
Andrea, before we go back to Mr. Speed, could Mr. Wittick just tell us a little more about who he is?
Oh, all right. So, yes, I am actually the principal of the Mount Rasta Primary and Infant School in St. Catherine, and also the host of the Saudi Crest show on YouTube, where I look at sports, entertainment, and education.
Okay, thank you very much. Andrea?
A very peculiar area, Mr. Wittick. With I always wonder how that school, with the safety and where you're located on the Mount Rasta there, but it has always been a quiet school, no violence. Rural schools are less prone to violence, and it's in my backyard. All right, Mr. Speed, based on the fact that you are a former JTA president, we just wanted your views based on the current, almost what I could describe as hostile and unsettled relationship between the teachers and the government to the Ministry of Education, what percentage of our teachers do you anticipate will be seeking employment in other countries? And what, in anticipation of that, do you think the ministry will be able to effectively fill the gap, should any exist?
I've said this before. I think 1 in every 4, maybe 1 in every 5, so maybe about 20% of the teachers are actively seeking employment overseas. And we could say that maybe about that same percentage would have migrated already within the last, say, year. So what you have here is a dilemma. I can't see us producing enough teachers to fill those gaps, and not just enough teachers, but enough teachers who would immediately grasp what it is that they need to do in the real world of teaching and go out there and teach effectively, so that our kids would be the beneficiary of this kind of expertise that we have come accustomed to, and that we would anticipate going forward, because it takes any maybe 3 years to actually learn the curriculum at a grade level properly, to be able to teach it well and to guide the students along the right path. Because teaching practice, for instance, is kind of artificial, you know. So when they're out there on teaching practice, they believe that they're doing so well and so on. But when they are faced and on teaching practice, sometimes they are ushered. They have the grade coordinators and the class teacher, the supervisors to help them and monitor them. When they come out and they have a class on their own, it's a totally different story. So I don't anticipate that the replacements are going to just like that. And we have to think in a serious way that whilst we're saying every child can learn, we have to think in a very serious way that the right people with the right amount of experience and expertise are required to make sure that every child gets that opportunity to learn. Right? So I am on that, and this thing started somewhere 2016, you know, because one of the things that we must know, I tell the nation, is that schools are underfunded, and because of inflation over the past few years, it has become even more conspicuous, because what you could spend to buy a tin of paint back in 2015, it's like almost doubled now. So when the ministry is continuing to give a school $150,000 to run that, to maintain, for maintenance grant, run that school for the year, to maintain it for the year, and it doesn't matter if it is a big school, primary school, or a small primary school. So you have some primary schools with 5 classrooms, but you have, on the other hand, now you have primary schools with 30 classrooms. They are giving you $150,000 for to run the small.
So are you saying that it doesn't matter the size of the school, the disbursement of funds to maintain the school is the same?
That is what
that doesn't make much sense.
talk about.
That seemed very ridiculous, very, very nonsensical.
And it is still there. It is still happening. And that $150,000 is finished before the school finished in August. One spend. I was at Russell Primary, and when I wanted to paint that school, I had to buy at least a gallon for each classroom, and I cannot do inside out either. But I try to do it inside all the time every year. And when I purchase paint alone, and I don't think of money yet, it is way over 150,000. and we don't start
Because
the principle.
my take would be, Mr. Speed, is that okay, the school or some classrooms are identified for renovation or a painting job. You get it cost and you submit the the proposal for the renovation to the ministry, and then the ministry disperse the funds accordingly. That seemed like a rational approach to me. But to say a small school get 150, a medium-sized school gets 150, a large, it just seemed crazy. It just seemed very impractical.
That's not their policy. If you put that together and submit it, it's going to stay there until 5 years time when you go back there. It's not their policy to submit things like those. If you are repairing a fence at the school, very rarely they take that on. So the schools have to be maintained, and when the funds are finished in the first month of a term, you have 4 more months, 3 more months to go in that term. The principals and the teachers have to raise funds and find creative ways to supplement the already sometimes already late subvention that comes in, because we find that it is a habit for the subventions to reach the schools a month after the term has started.
May I come in?
Hold on.
Okay.
Just finish this one point here. Raise funds, do all sorts of things, and it cuts into the teaching time. And when it cuts into the teaching time, the kids suffer that learning loss. And what was worse about it, the worst thing about it is that our former minister, Mr. Reid, saw that the teachers were trying to get funds and would not work across the board. And teachers, principals, they tried things to earn something more to use in the school, to improve the school and maintain the program. They were referred to by Mr. Reid as extortionists.
Wow.
So
some of these things I'm listening and I'm like, wow, how could any minister, any permanent secretary, or any government just think that these strategies, these policies, they are conducive to the nation's kids learning in an environment that is conducive and effective for learning. It's mind-boggling. Let's hear what Mrs. Foster Allen has to add.
So thank you, Andrea. I just wanted to make it clear that Owen was actually speaking about the grants to primary schools. There's a sort of different approach to how secondary schools have been funded for the purposes of doing maintenance and infrastructural work and so on. But I think we need to just go back a bit, because if you recall, under the Portia Simpson Miller-led government, we were under a very strict IMF regimen, and each ministry was told, you have a hard ceiling and you have a hard flooring. You cannot move. If we say you're getting $83 billion for your budget for education, that is what you're getting. No more, no more, no more. You leapfrog over into 2016, I think 2017, 2018, the repayment of the loans on the IMF agreement, I think there was a 0.05% cut in that repayment, the percentage that was required, the interest rate repayment. And the question for me during those years was, what is the government doing with that money? And if you look back at the estimates of expenditure, the budgets for those years, you will see that most of that money went on infrastructural things, including billions on building up the JDF. Okay. So therefore, education did not benefit. And now we see where the finance ministry has decided to, bring down the debt to GDP, and fine, that's fine, but at what cost? And you would have heard Comrade Leader Mark Golding speaking about, and the leader of the opposition speaking about cushioning the crisis. And actually, lots of people have been talking about it. That the issues surrounding education now, if we don't, in fact, when I say lots of people, there was I think it was an IDB report. There was also a UNICEF report on how much it would cost Jamaica to bring children back up to where they needed to be now. And I think, my memory serves me right, the recommendation was that on top of what Jamaica now spends, and this was like 2-3 years ago, on top of what Jamaica now spends on education, they needed to spend an additional, Jamaica now spends X amount, we needed to spend an additional $3 billion at least annually to bring children back to, just to bring them back to where they should have been, right? So when you think about priorities and you think about education, education is not a priority for this government.
Obviously not. Obviously not. All right, 2 questions that I want you all to focus on before we close out this segment is that I just want your views on, outside of monetary compensation, what other ways do you think the government could motivate and improve teachers' morale? And also, what are your final views on the present state of our education system? Taking that into consideration, the present state of the education system, what recommendation, your final views of some recommendations that you think would improve any gaps and shortfalls to meet the changing times and the mindset of the kids of this
All right.
era?
Okay, so one, I think with the learning loss that the kids suffered over the past, the COVID era, I think the government has to look into a program of training for some specialists, like the literacy specialists and the numeracy specialists in particular. They have to look at psychosocial programs. How are we reintegrating, especially the younger kids, into the school system? The ones who would have maybe just started grade 1 or infant school when the COVID came in, and how you are going to re-socialize those to let them feel comfortable, let them understand that school is a safe place and is a place for them to come and learn, and not just learn about the curriculum, but I think there needs to be an establishment of some social and emotional intelligence program, because the behaviors that we see in some of the schools, those behaviors, we can't look to react to them. We have to try to find ways to prevent them from happening. And I think we have come up short with that over the past 7 years. I have to talk about the past 7 years because people love to talk about how long the other side is in and how long they are in. It's 7 years now, and would have anticipated that some strides would have been made. In terms of what we can do to hold the teachers, I'm not too sure because the teachers are talking, they are listening to the comments. I think if some of the comments were less terse too, coming from both the side of the government officials and the school administrators, and sometimes even some school boards, I think they'll look at how they communicate with the regular classroom teachers, because they need to understand that maybe 1 in every 3 teachers would have gone through some sort of trauma if you have taught for more than 5 years per se. You would have gone through some sort of trauma within your interactions with parents and kids and school administrators, and then you learn to empathize with the teachers first and foremost, because many teachers will tell you that one of the things that push them, push factor, is the way their administrators, coming from even the ministry, they are frustrated in many regards from even the ministry, but even their leaders inside schools, they will tell you that many times their papers, and that's another thing that I think they must do and do fast in the Ministry of Education, is to move from that is where they need to move to digital.
Digitize, bulk of paperwork all over the place. Yeah.
Cashless thing that they can push, and they could always push the cashless thing because it might be a good thing, but the moving the ministry to maybe fully digital is something that should be a priority right now. And even lesson plan, but these things, sometimes not the big things that hold the people, small things that shape them. A lesson plan bank digitally, and it puts into the time that teachers will have to spend to do these plans from scratch on a weekend, so they have a little bit more time with their families. So things are essential, but they also have to look at themselves as politicians too, and to look at what they took for themselves recently. If they're not making some moves and telling people the right things about rolling back this exorbitant amount that they took for themselves, the teachers are.
It has to be rolled back. It has to be rolled back. It has to be rolled back. It's the biggest highway robbery. Hold up and take on the Jamaican people. It has to be rolled back.
That's the sad story, because many teachers are packing to leave, and those who are not packing, they are applying fast and furious with more speed than.
And I personally know 2 who are leaving in July, well, next month. Right, so.
Okay. Comrade Speed, Professor Speed, and Ms. Pastor Allen, as a matter of fact, any one of you make an answer, as educators, how would you rate the performance of the current Ministry of Education?
With 10 being the highest and 1 being the lowest, 5.
We didn't hear the scale. We didn't hear the scale, Mrs. Foster Allen. 1 to 5.
I said 5 out of 10, because I mean she's holding the thing, but it's really just holding.
Okay, so what would be your recommendation for improvement from your perspective?
It's difficult to recommend improvement if the thing done gone bad already. Clearly, my take on education is not the same as that which obtains now. So for me to, in fact, I've said in another forum that short of a revolution in education, I don't see how we can really get it right for all of our children. I don't think the Pattison report is going to be helpful. In fact, just thinking about it, in 2004, I was on that PJ Pattison inspired and instituted task force on education. If you recall, in 2006-07, a JLP government came in. We were just at the point where we were trying to sort out, how this transformation thing should take place. 2007 to 2011, very little happened. We got back into power 2011-12. There were some things that we were able to do, and 4 years and we were out. So the Pattison report has said, a lot of the things that the Ray Davis report recommended have not been done, and these are the same things you need to be working on. Almost 20 years on. So I personally believe that a lot of things need to go. I was the first national education inspector. I think we should shut down the inspectorate. Owen will be happy to hear me say that. But I think the time has come for, if you're going to empower teachers, you have to put the locus of the operation has to be in the school, and you have to get leaders who understand the urgency of education. Mr. Whittick, you need to have urgency, and you need teachers who feel empowered to do what they have to do. And I even believe at this moment, at this time, we could cut some of the content from the national curriculum, national standard curriculum. We should give teachers more time to work with the children they have. Given the situation, and there's a sort of little, are we saying that come July, come September, we're going to lose another 20%, 30% of teachers? I don't know. And the fact is, we are probably going to lose not so much the novice teachers, those with 1 to 3 years of practice. We're going to lose the middle band of teachers, and the ones that are they've been teaching for 5-10 years. They're the ones who've been worse off because of this compensation review. A lot of that middle band of teachers have complained and continue to complain that it's not worth it, right? So I think we're going to have, in Jamaica, we're going to have a chaotic situation. It's a conundrum because on the one hand, I'm thinking, by the time those teachers graduate from college and they get into the system, it takes them a little while to become good at what they're doing. And our children need good to excellent teachers right now. So maybe we'll have to look at a system where perhaps in year 3, for year 3 and 4, these trainee teachers go into the classroom as assistant teachers, and class sizes are manageable. We have to think differently. I believe that a lot of our children, and Mr. Whittick, you can probably bear me out, a lot of our children, whether you live in rural areas or in urban areas, are coming to the primary school. They're not reading at their age level. I said to somebody today, shut down the schools, or at least shut down the curriculum for six weeks, put in something like a Beckham, or a phonics-based literacy program. I know that within 6 to 8 weeks, every child in Jamaica, as long as you do not have a special educational need that hinders you from learning to read, can read. I also think that it's time for us to stop skirting around the issue of Jamaican language and teach, use, and utilize Jamaican as a first language in our schools. Cassidy and LePage had it down to pat. The Wycliffe Bible Society has translated books of the Bible into Jamaican. What's holding us back? A mentality that says we're not good enough. What we have is not good enough.
My opinion on that, Mrs. Foster Allen, is that though we patois, our local dialect is our first language, it has not been standardized to an extent where everyone can appreciate, can read and appreciate it when it's written.
Right.
Because I have a friend who he uses the Patois Bible, and when he's a witness and when he tries to communicate with me and quote the scripture in Patois, I'm like, I can't figure out. I'm the chat Patois, I'm the chatting. Well, and what is going to be a challenge is that every country, every parish has its own version of our local dialect.
But Andrea,
I go to some
let me
parish and I
stop
hear
you
they talk.
there. Let me stop you. Every shire county in the UK, every state and within the states in America, I went to some of the southern states in America. I couldn't understand what the people in my say, right? But they used their language. So you're always going to find dialect and patois and variation of language. When I lived in Birmingham. Leaving Jamaica, going to Birmingham as a 12, 13-year-old, I couldn't understand what am I saying in Birmingham. So I opted for standard English, British standard English. But truth be told, where there is a will, there is a way. I was saying to a friend this morning that most teachers in Jamaica, especially in the primary schools, will use Jamaican, and I'm going to use Patois for the sake of this program, will use Patois in communicating to the children, because those little ones at grade 1, they come into school using, the majority of them come into school using their mother tongue, their first language. Now, the challenge, Andrea, is that we have not sat down and said, we are going to use Cassidy and LePage. There's a lexicon, there's a phonology, everything is there. How is Wycliffe Bible Society able to translate text written in Greek and Hebrew, right, into Jamaican Patois? Every language has its structures. We have our structure. It's just a matter of teaching our children, teaching our teachers first, and then teaching our children. Now, the other thing about the language thing is that, you know, we have this thing about language that it's difficult and we can't learn it and so on, but that's not true. Any language you want to learn, especially when you're a child, you can learn. The brain is wired that way. So I think it's more will. It's more will than anything else.
Okay,
thank you, Mrs. Foster Allen. Go ahead.
Ms. Foster Allen, Tony Smith, who is watching the show, is asking, what is the current budget for the MOE and what would it cost to deliver quality education?
Wow. So I would have to look that up to tell you what will it cost to deliver quality education. We would have to sit down and decide, you know, on what quality education looks like. There was a time when some of the high schools were saying that, well, in 2004, when the Ray Davis-led task force reported we were saying that each secondary school child was subsidized by their parents or others to the tune of about $90,000 at the time, right? So the cost sharing portion, the school fees portion, is now about 17,000 for children on 19,000 for children on path, and I think 17,000 for the other children. Now, if it was 90,000 nearly 20 years ago, that parents were supporting some of their children with, it's probably, like $200,000 now per child per annum. That's probably what you're looking at, and that's rough. Some of the traditional high schools, they have lots of extracurricular activities. They may have additional staffing. They have access to a lot more in terms of curricular offering that is not necessarily part and parcel of the standard, national standard curriculum. So all of those things, when taken together, you're talking perhaps about the $200,000 per child in a secondary school.
Okay, thank you very much. Another one. Mr. Speed talk about that the schools are underfunded. I hear you say something about $83 billion. So I'm asking now, are Jamaicans getting value for the vast sum of money that's been channeled in the education ministry? Some may say it's too much, like myself, and some will say it's not enough. What's your view? I mean, it's for all three of you.
All right. So I can't say exactly where money is to, because yes, you could be getting a large sum of money, but maybe you are spending and prioritizing some things that you should not be prioritizing. For instance, I just can give you a quick example. They give, at the primary level, they give $120 per student for pass. And that means to the Ministry of Education, but it is channeled there. I'm saying if it is that with inflation, eating away at the goods that you buy to prepare meals, and you continue to have it at that level for 5, 6, 7, 8 years, what are you really doing? Where's your so you give $120 per student, and in the school, when the people come there to check, the auditors come there to check, they want to see, and the nutritionists, they want to see that you put whatever amount of pounds of meat in that plate, and you must put vegetables, and you must put everything there, and you must get a drink, and they tell you these things. But the reality is that for a meal at the primary level, for a good meal, you might find yourself paying $300 for a meal. They're giving you $120. So these are some of the things. You're still having shortage of books at the high school level. When I was president, I went out there and they were trying to cause me to, I was a, but I went into the schools. In fact, I traveled to 100 plus schools within 6 months. And I went to the high schools and I saw, for instance, books for 37 kids doing math. 16, they're doing CSEC. So I am saying place and the funds going into pockets or going into other places that should not have been. And then we are neglecting the other things. Desks and chairs. During my year, I can remember they were trying to carry on as if it was mystery with the kids not having adequate desks and chairs to sit on, and to sit around. And all I did was to carry the numbers to them and show them, because I could get that information very quickly. In 5-10 minutes, I could get that from across Jamaica. That's the structure of the JTA. And these are the things that I'm talking about, the basic things. Schools that still have partitions are still in schools. Blackboard partitions are still in schools. Blackboards, partitioning classrooms. So when teachers have to shift, they can't teach while other teacher is teaching next door, because the noise level is unbearable to both. We still have that existing in Jamaica. And you talk about this big budget. What it means is that the management of the funds has to come into question.
Could I just answer the question?
Go ahead.
That Mr. Mary, you asked, or somebody viewing the program asked? It's 102.9 billion for the education budget 23-24, and that's non-recurrent. Just a minute, that's recurrent. Just looking at the information for non-debt recurrent expenditure. So recurrent expenditure, $142.9 billion. Expenditure.
And includes resources, salaries, everything pertaining to education. Okay.
Right. Yes.
I don't think they're getting value for money. It's not being channeled in the right directions. Clearly, it seems like some funds are going to the wrong places.
What could be good? Ladies and gentlemen, what I believe would be good for us is, as it relates to that $83 million budget, if we could get breakdown of that budget to say how much money will go to infrastructure, how much is to salary, because as Mr. Mary said, that he believes that 83 billion is too much. But the fact is, when you look at, you're using $2,500 to educate one child per year, Sir Mary.
Yes,
How would you quantify that?
That's how much per day. Work it down per day, sir.
I don't want to go there right now, sir. It will not sound good at all. But the fact is, that may take us to probably about $13 or $14 per day.
I think
so. If we get,
sorry about that.
If I get the understanding to know, well, fine. Let's see how much of this $83 billion going to salary, infrastructure, and so on. Then we probably could look and to see if we're getting value for money.
So, just to say that the salary costs have always been high. I think about the last time I checked, it was about 83% of the recurrent expenditure. So principals and school leaders have very little room to maneuver in terms of expenditure on the curriculum and in other areas of school provision, educational provision. I think the problem is a little complicated because of, and I mentioned it before, the IMF restrictions, the holding of salary increases over a long period of time, just to keep in that sort of constraint that we had. The fact is, we have not been spending enough on education, Mr. Myrie. We just have not been spending enough on education over many years. So what we have now is an accumulated loss, right? because we just haven't been doing it. When you take the infrastructure, as Owen said earlier, some of the schools, I don't know, Mr. Whittick, if that is still the case, but the last time I checked, some schools, they were still using the blackboard partitions, right, in 2023. And then when you start to think about technology infrastructure, a lot of schools are still not there. So, some people who are outside of the system can always say, boy, we spend a lot of money on education, and we don't see where we are get feet. But really and truly, when you look at the working conditions, physical conditions that teachers have to work in. I remember as an inspector, when I was with the National Education Inspectorate, I went into a school and I told the teacher, I said, teacher, you teach like a hell, you teach all you got, but the children are not even hearing you, because it was one of those classrooms with that, the blackboard partitioning. The children at the back of her classroom were disturbing and were being disturbed by the children at the back of the other classroom, or should I say, beyond the blackboards. It just...
Okay.
This is Pastor Allen. I am happy to hear you, especially speaking about how, that sort of inspectorate. But how would you rate a school like that, where the infrastructure is so poor? I don't know, as a school leader myself, how I could operate, because, well, happy for my staff and what would I say now, all the stakeholders at the Mount Cluster Primary and Infant School. We have tried our very best with little resources to remove chalkboard partition. As a matter of fact, we have used plyboard to make partitions. And even though it is not even to the ceiling, but at least mention that can help reduce the noise level. But the fact is, the resources that we have in our schools are so inadequate. So inadequate. And you spoke about empowering our teachers. The best way to empower any teacher, in my estimation, is to give that teacher the resources that he or she needs to perform.
I agree.
And without it, then the teachers will always be in a situation like where we are now. I understand about the whole issue of salaries. But as much as you want to be, if you give me the money that I am expected, fine. But tell me, how will I perform without the resources?
But Mr. Whittick, are the teachers aggressively lobbying for the resources as much as they're lobbying for increase in salaries?
Yes.
Is it an equal lobbyism going on for both the resources and the pay?
Let me tell you this, and I'm going to speak as a teacher and along with colleagues. If you should interview teachers right across the country, you will hear more of the teachers asking for resources or better working conditions than increased salary. Yes, everybody wants the money, everybody wants an increase. But when you really look at the situation to which you're working in, the working condition, you alluded to the classrooms that are parted with chalkboards. No money will stop or will help that. The money in your pocket can't help to change that situation. Many teachers every day have been asking for better working conditions.
Okay.
I said I look at the Ministry of National Security the same way. I feel that too much money goes to that ministry, and crime.
Excuse me, Sir Murray, you're a bit low. I'm not hearing you.
You're not hearing me?
No, you're kind of breaking up. It's a little distorted. Now, but he was saying, Mr. Whittick, that is the same views he has on the Ministry of National Security, with the amount of money that is pumped into that ministry and the country is not getting any, basically they're not seeing the effect of it. It's just a huge expense on taxpayers, and we don't see the effectiveness of or the results.
What I will say to that, I am no security expert, but if you should compare both ministries, security and education, the operation is, I would say, is different, right? As it relates to security, we're looking at, we want better crime fighting initiatives. We're not seeing the initiatives there. The resources are there, and as you mentioned, maybe is a head issue at the top. But the fact about it, and Sir Mary, is that when you look at education, and we say that we actually groom or create all of these other professions to make up all these in different ministries. But the fact is, we can, as Miss said, we can teach and teach and teach. But there are some basic things that are needed to ensure that we complete the wheel.
Okay.
You know, I just want to mention this. And we talk about initiative and we talk a lot, but we don't look at the early childhood. We look at the infant schools. We have spoken so loud. I mean, our voices are loud about we want to create that atmosphere. We want to get our students to start learning from such a young age. But where are the resources for this? We look at now, and I'll just say just a little piece of my mind as it relates to the early childhood. The Early Childhood Commission is tasked to have the infant schools or the basic schools in the country certified under their standards. But they are the same body that is blocking the schools from being certified.
Interesting.
So you tell me, that is the only way for an infant department to get money, you know, or to get, even infrastructure, to get the resources, is for us to be certified under the Early Childhood Commission. If you don't get these resources. And it needs money for you to be certified. As a matter of fact, if you have a play area, if you don't have the pea gravel inside the play, you can't be certified. And that's just one aspect. Are you saying to me that without pea gravel, the students can't effectively play to develop their motor skills in a play area?
Okay, interesting.
So these are the little things that we need to put together. We need to put the resources where our mouth is. Not just money, but other tangible resources.
Sounds practical. Thank you so very much, Mrs. Foster Allen, for joining us, Mr. Owen Speed and Mr. Whittick. Thank you so much for your very profound and enlightening, educational, informative contribution to this segment of the show. Very, very valuable contribution made. I'm not an educator, but I saw where Mrs. Foster Allen drew on the Orlando Patterson Commission report that was done on the transformation of the education system, and a very alarming summary of that report is that although the great majority of the children have access to primary and secondary schooling, Jamaica still has a severe learning crisis, in that a majority of students at the end of the primary school, they remain illiterate and they remain innumerate and just leave school with no marketable skills. In 2019, the primary exit profile exams for grade 6 students, the report stated that 49% were successful in science, 55% were successful in competent language and arts. A breakdown of the language arts resulted that a third of students could not read, 56% could not write, 57% could not identify information in a simple sentence. that is very, very troubling. It's very, very troubling. And our education system needs competent persons at all different levels of leadership, right down to the classroom, from the ministry permanent secretary to senior administrators, because the only way we can get out of the other social ills and the other crime and violence and on everything else that deteriorates our society and prevents us from really realizing our vision 2030. I guess we can kind of throw that out the door and come up with a different year, vision 2060. Maybe there'll be some hope there. But when I see these figures and these percentage, and when I read the summary of this report, I am troubled. I am deeply troubled, because our children are our future. And if we have a nation of children who are quote unquote illiterate and innumerate in such a large percentage without nothing being done fundamentally to date to vastly improve those crisis number, we are in trouble. And I'm imploring everybody who sits at the very different critical levels of society who has anything to do with education to really go back to that report, go back through it thoroughly, and focus on these information, because it is troubling. We're in trouble as a nation. Fixing the problem also, I saw where some mention this came up in a Gleaner article today, where they were making reference to us modeling Mississippi model that they used to basically reform their education system and to get their kids up to a normal standard of literacy and numeracy, both at the academic level and at the technical and vocational educational training level. And actually what was done was that a legislation was passed, the Literacy-Based Promotions Act. And this, the model that Mississippi used, they adopted it from Florida, and other states have adopted it, and it seemed to be effective. So maybe we need to look on those states and to see what we can take from what they have done to basically transform their education system and the learning process for the nation kids, or for their country or the state kids within the respective state, and to see what we can adopt from those states that they have used to effectively transform their learning model, their educational model, because we cannot remain this stagnated within the Ministry of Education at all levels, because at the end of the day is our nation's kids that suffer. And it has a ripple effect, it has a further effect, because when people cannot articulate themselves rationally, reasonably, because of a lack of education and a lack of being trained properly to do so, they resort to violence. They become deviant and they become disruptive in society, and they basically have no useful contribution to society. And they're the future. We're a nation that we age, maybe we're not aging as rapidly as some other nation within even on the European continent, but it's natural that a population ages, and we have to take care and nurture the youth, because they are the future, and we have to have very smart and educated and articulate people who can reason well and make sound decisions and be practical and be rational if we want to see a changed society. So again, thank you so much, Mrs. Foster Allen, Mr. Owen Speed, and Mr. Wittig, for your very sound and profound contribution to this area. And there's so much more that could have been said, and we definitely will have you back, because there's a lot more to say on this matter. Thank you so
very
much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I must say to you that you could check out the Saudi Crest show on YouTube in your spare time. Thank you.
Okay, I just took a screenshot of it, so I log on. And if you could just post some information, maybe a website, how to join, that would, or you can give it to Mr. Steve, he will share it with us.
Okay, fine.
So,
Yeah,
so we know when to log on.
no problem. On a Wednesday. Wednesday is scheduled for educational content. Every Wednesday
Awesome.
night,
Awesome. What time?
8 o'clock,
At
8 Jamaica
8 o'clock.
time.
Okay, Mr. Wittig, thank you so
Okay.
much. Mr. Mary, over to you.